Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and I wanted to talk about the things I've recently learned in Arkham Horror. The game is huge, and I'm constantly learning new things and changing opinions as I go. And today, I wanted to take a moment and talk about 3 investigators that I definitely underranked all my tier list videos a few weeks ago. As you can see, the first character I'll be talking about is Preston Fairmont, and this deck does a lot of things, but all of them hinge on Black Market. Now, Black Market is just a generally very strong card, because it helps you set up so much faster, helps you draw through your deck so much quicker, and on subsequent cycles through your deck, it allows you to really effectively either skip your weakness or play out crazy powerful turns where you know you're going to hit all of the cards you need. But Preston Fairmont takes that to 11. The core concept of this deck is that you're going to get all of your assets in play, double a Black Market, and between the cards in your hand and the 10 cards you just put on the board, that's going to be every single card in your deck. And every turn, you're going to take one horror, but you get to play literally whatever you want from your event pool. That would be generally strong in anyone, but Preston Fairmont has some things unique to him that make this way better in him. The big thing unique to Preston Fairmont is if I'm trying to play all of my events every single turn, I need a lot of money, and Preston Fairmont gets 4 extra resources every turn. The second thing that's unique to him, however, is arguably much more important. It's look what I found and used in conjunction with the old keyring. If I'm playing every card in my deck every turn, look what I found is 4 testless clues. And old keyring combos with it really well. Generally speaking, look what I found isn't that great. It only works on 1 or 2 shroud locations if you're being reduced to 0, which Preston always is. But old keyring lets you turn 3 and 4 shroud locations into 1 and 2 shroud locations, so you can use old keyring on those to trigger the look what I found. And it won't even lose charges because you're going to fail. Before I go through an actual turn as Preston and tell you all the broken things that are happening, I want to establish that once you've set up and you play your first Black Market, you can always play another one. Most of the time, your first Black Market just hits the second Black Market, and since they use the same timing window, you get to choose which one goes first, and you just play the Black Market from your previous Black Market, and you're fine. If you didn't draw it in the Black Market and it's one of your bottom cards, it's not already in your hand, then you can just do something like play your easy marks or use actual draw actions or fail a skill test with your drawing things to draw it that way. Even if you only had a single Black Market, it would still be possible to keep cycling your Black Markets. You just have to cycle your deck twice every turn, but you have enough soak and money and healing options that would still be okay. It just wouldn't be optimal. There are so many ways to keep the Black Markets going indefinitely, so let's talk about what you're doing once you're playing from your entire deck every turn. The first thing you're doing is cheating the system. You're doing that in a lot of ways, but this deck actually has full synergy access, so it's going to give you 10 resources as a fast action. We also have 2 copies of Antiquary in play, and those resources will be directly usable on intel reports and look what I found, as well as Preston's ability. So you have 19 resources every turn to play with. Then, in any order, you're going to do the following things. You're going to investigate, maybe with old keyring, maybe not, depending on the shroud, and you're going to use look what I found twice. You're going to use 2 copies of intel report and find 4 clues with those. You're going to play 2 copies of call for backup, moving twice, dealing 2 damage to enemies, finding clues, and healing anything on the board for 2/2. The total cost for all this is 8 from intel reports, going up to 12 with look what I found, going up to 14 with call for backup. So the economy of this isn't a problem. If you wanted to be gaining resources every turn to push your well-connected up faster, you could. Now, while the economy isn't a problem, that is your entire turn. That usually won't matter. After all, you're able to move twice as part of the call for backup, and your entire turn was spent getting testless clues, so there's nothing to complain about. But if you do need to move more, you can use this ace in the hole on yourself. Ace in the hole is actually not best used in Preston. You would much rather leave that on the board in your Black Market. That sounds weird. And the reason for that is because Black Market isn't just for you. Anyone can play the cards that you've set aside. So yeah, with 3 more actions and having already played all your cards, you really don't have that much value you can contribute to the team. You could maybe spam out your easy marks and use that to transfer money to you to push your well-connected. You might need to move more, and that would be a reason to take ace in the hole. But most of the time, you just leave the ace in the hole on the board for your team to take advantage of, for your fighter to have twice as much turn, or for your other clover or your other flex character to get 3 more actions and help find more clues and just break the pace of the game. This Preston deck is going to AFK the first 5 turns of every scenario pretty much, it has a good chunk of setup time before it's fully online. But after that, when you're getting 10 testless clues around, and you're giving someone else on your team 3 extra actions on top of that, the deck is just disgusting. If I were evaluating this deck just on how it performs in the second half of this scenario and the second half of a campaign, it would be easy S tier, best deck in the game. But because of the setup time, there are a lot of other characters that are still crushing the game just to a slightly lesser degree than this Preston deck. And more importantly, because even with setup time, this is still an S tier deck, this deck doesn't exist at level 0. It can't exist until like 20 experience, and the level 0 version when you're trying to play big money is kind of dog. It's not the best. This is the Preston deck that I'm currently playing in Edge of the Earth. And you'll notice it has a lot of the same pieces with the experience cards, but it's a Dark Horse deck. It's not the big money deck that I'm talking about. And the reason for that is because I think that Preston as a Dark Horse build in the early scenarios is just so much better, and you would rather have an upgrade path where you transition from Dark Horse to big money somewhere around scenario 3 or scenario 4. And don't get me wrong, Dark Horse Preston is a good deck, but it is nowhere near the S tier. Dark Horse Preston is just, depending on your draw and how you line up against the scenario, he's somewhere between good and very good, but he's not amazing, he's not broken at all. And the fact that you're going to be playing this Dark Horse Preston deck for several scenarios, as well as having the setup time, I think will probably hold Preston out of the S tier, and maybe even hold him decently down. Maybe he doesn't even make A+, depending on how the whole scenarios go. So the fact that you have to play the Dark Horse deck at the beginning of the campaign, which is only good, it's not breaking the game at all, and then in the later scenarios you have all the setup time, I don't think Preston's an S tier character. Based on his performance in the campaign I played, I'm not even confident that he's an A+ character. But he's definitely not B tier. He's definitely somewhere in A tier and probably somewhere higher in A tier. Moving on, let's talk about Leo Anderson and a really funny mistake I made that caused me to evaluate him poorly. I built 2 sled dog decks at the same time to test sled dogs. I made one for Yorick and one for Leo, and I tested them both at level 0. And it turns out that the Leo deck is trash at level 0, and the Yorick deck is just functional and good beginning to end. So I stopped thinking about Leo and was like, all right, cool, he's basically the same. It turns out, though, that green has this card called Adaptable that I just forgot about, and I don't have to play a sled dog deck at the start of the game. And Leo got a lot more than sled dogs. He got Cyclopean Hammer, which is the only weapon in the game that really competes with Flamethrower in my eyes. He also got Black Market, which is legitimately just the strongest draw card in the game. It's better than anything Seeker has. Well, it's not better than Untabooed Mr. Rook, but that's neither here nor there. And also, he got the Hallowed Mirror from Circle Undone, or Return to Circle Undone, at about the same time. And Hallowed Mirror is actually the thing that makes this deck disgusting in the late game. And late game disgusting is a really good summary of this Leo deck. Because if you look at what I have, none of this looks like bells and whistles. Like, the most bells and whistles things here are upgrading your stand-togethers, and that's kind of it. The emergency cache, you can shave 8 experience and go down to 49. And after that point, everything in this deck is meaningful to the deck in a very clear way. At level 0, this deck is not fighting like an S-tier fighter. It just isn't. But when you get to the end of a campaign with this deck and you're playing something that looks like this, Leo Anderson is the strongest fighter in the game. He's also the strongest healer in the game. And let me explain why that is. Because of Black Market's easy marks and just making your deck more consistent with Stick to the Plan, he's going to have the easiest time getting to a small deck where he's played Hallowed Mirror, and he can spend his dead turns just shuffling it back in and healing for 2 every time. And speaking of dead turns, he's going to have more of those than anyone else because he has Leo and Haste. So he's able to make disgusting use of Hallowed Mirror level 3 and legitimately be the best healer in the game. Fighters usually are trying to find some way to find clues with their dead turns, but Leo can just heal his entire team. And the big part is that if he doesn't need to heal his entire team, he has multiple allies and beat cops and guard dogs that are directly leveraging their health as advantage, and he can heal them up to get more use out of them. He's not one of those healers like Carolyn Fern or Bob Jenkins, where the healing is great, but most of the time it wasn't necessary. When it's not necessary in Leo, it directly translates into more fighting power. And speaking of fighting power, Cyclopean Hammer is disgusting in Leo. It's so much better than Flamethrower, even though Leo has Contraband and Swift Reload and can help Flamethrower a lot. And the reason it's better is because he has access to Haste in Leo. Again, having 5 actions on a melee weapon lets you use it to such an extreme degree, whereas with a Flamethrower or anything else, you'd eventually run out of bullets. That just doesn't happen with a Cyclopean Hammer, which is swinging at base 8 on Leo. So between the insane draw and consistency of Black Market, the insane raw power of a melee weapon that is Cyclopean Hammer with 5 actions, and just the stupid amounts of healing he gets access to from Hallowed Mirror level 3, Leo is so much stronger at the end of a campaign than I was giving him credit for, and frankly, not as weak at the start as I was claiming he was. And you might notice that I didn't even mention the Sled Dogs while I've been talking about this deck. They're here. I mentioned the Sled Dogs when I was introducing the deck, but they really aren't that important to the deck. They're really nice as a movement option, but you've got 5 actions. You don't really need the Sled Dogs for movement. However, if you're cycling your whole deck consistently and you're really consistently able to get out 3 to 4 Sled Dogs, I don't see a reason not to run them. There's probably something else they could be. This doesn't need to be a Sled Dog deck at all. And before I move on from the Leo deck, I want to emphasize really heavily, as far as pure fighters go, and this is more than a pure fighter, it can support heal your team, but as far as pure fighters go, at Scenario 8 at the end of a campaign, Leo Anderson is the undisputed champion. I'm going to give some minor spoilers for War of the Outer Gods, so if you don't want to hear that, skip forward to the next section about Patrice. But I do need to talk about this specifically. War of the Outer Gods is a really combat-heavy scenario, and you can win it just by doing combat. You don't have to do the clue stuff. So I tested this Leo deck in solo in War of the Outer Gods with the intention of just fighting everything. And I mean everything. I house ruled it so that if an agenda card mentioned an enemy, I spawned it. You're only supposed to do that on the first of the 3 factions that progresses, but I spawned every single boss enemy. And in fact, I spawned all 3 of the ancient ones at the end, not just one of them. I just wanted to test this deck as a fighter. It never struggled. It ended the scenario with most of its health and horror after fighting all 3 ancient ones, and it killed all 3 of them in one turn back to back to back. I'm not exaggerating when I say this deck is comically better at fighting than it could ever possibly need to be, but more than that, it actually has meaningful team support. Healing is incredibly valuable. Damage and horror is usually how you lose, and you can just give up a lot of your damage. Stop healing your beat cops, stop healing your guard dogs, and just heal your teammates instead. And you'll be fine. So yeah, the Leo deck is just disgusting. Before I move on from Leo, how do I think I'm going to rank him? There's no way he gets into S tier just because the start of his campaign isn't strong enough. And you might be like, but you ranked Will Yorick in S tier. I've moved him down already. I'll talk more about my tier list and how I've changed it in a future video. Where am I going to place Leo? Probably somewhere high in A+. He's good in Scenario 1. He's not crazy at all. And he scales up to be something completely broken. I think that's A+ to me. I don't know where in it just yet. That'll shake up over time when I eventually play him in a campaign. But he's very, very good. This endgame deck is just disgusting. And thanks to In the Thick of It and Sharon's Obel, you can get to this endgame deck pretty reliably. It's just a matter of what parts do you upgrade first. Are you going for the Charisma package? Are you going for the Draw package? Are you going for the Cyclopean Hammer and the Stick to the Plan? All of it's important. All of it's important, and it's so hard to say what you do first. And his level 0 deck just isn't as good. Like, coming over to the level 0 deck I've planned for him, if I took Charisma, the deck would be better, but I know I need the experience. So I'm taking Sharon's Obel instead to get 2 more experience. And at level 1, or level 0, scenario 1, however you want to phrase it, like, the deck's fine. It's a completely functional 4-fist Guardian. It's going to be good. It's probably going to be great, but not particularly remarkable. But it's not S tier. It's not doing the hard carry broken bullshit of S tier in the first parts of a campaign. And that's why I don't think Leo Anderson can ever be higher than, like, middle of A+. But do I think he's a B tier fighter? God, no. I was underestimating him by so much. Patrice is the last character that I've underestimated. I've underestimated her quite heavily, just like the other 2. I was actually shocked when I looked back that I put her in the middle of C tier, that I thought she was only fine. But I think when I did that, I commented that I thought I was underestimating her, but I wasn't quite sure what I was doing wrong. And the answer is twofold. The first is just that I was underestimating the old list that I was running. It wasn't this list. But the second part of it is that the list I was running wasn't optimal. I was doing the St. Hubert's Key and Arcane Research shenanigans that is so popular, but I'm very convinced that just going for more book checks and question marks and ignoring the head check stuff is fine. You don't need to use Sixth Sense. You can use Blur and Shriveling to function as a meaningful flex character. And the reason Sixth Sense doesn't matter is because Sixth Sense only gets one clue at a time. Building for it isn't helpful, because you need to be passing the book checks on Fortuitous Discovery and winging it anyway. So you build to pass book checks and to get question marks so that you can commit them to anything, including like the big Blur and Shriveling checks that you need to do for your weakness. And the deck just like flows really smoothly. What really pushes this character from being like a B tier character that I was underestimating to an A tier character that I was underestimating is the synergy package. The reason I have this one-of Scroll of Secrets isn't just for Crypt Show insurance. It's so that Call Her Backup will get a clue. I have everything else covered other than Seeker right now, and that's the most important part of Call Her Backup. Prophetic is also really nice. It means I don't have to worry about my economy nearly as much. I don't have to run cards like Emergency Cash to help me pay for my Fortuitous Discoveries or my spells, because Prophetic will do that. But it also lets me pump up my spells. I don't need to run those head icon skills anymore, because they're just permanently in play with Prophetic. So between just getting a fully online Call for Backup and Prophetic making the deck so much smoother to play, I think Patrice gets way, way better. And I think more than the other two characters with Patrice, I just feel like I was criminally underrating her. Leo's way stronger at the end of a campaign than I was thinking he was, and I was like down on him because I was memeing about sled dogs and not like taking him as seriously as I should have been. But I still evaluated him as the right character, I just didn't take into consideration his growth over a campaign. And with Preston, like, he's overpowered because of bullshit with breaking Black Market. For all I know, the next Taboo list will tone him down massively and he'll be a much more reasonable character. But with this Patrice deck, she's doing exactly what I thought she was doing, just much better than I was saying she didn't. This video is sort of inherently tied to my tier list, so I'm going to make a couple of quick notes about things that have changed that I don't want to commit a whole video to. I don't like the idea of making a tier list update video. I don't know, I've just talked about my tier list, I don't want to post a new one and talk about all the changes, so I'm just going to quickly throw out some notes about things that have changed. Diana and Calvin both moved down substantially, because their setup time is a problem, and I wasn't giving them enough credit for that. My D tier is only Lowland Skids at this point. I don't think anyone else is actually bad. Even Rita, I don't think is bad. I think she's fine. I've moved Monterey Jack down substantially because his level 1 deck, or his Scenario 1 level 0 deck, is just really, really janky and awkward. And lastly, I moved Joe Diamond up nearly an entire tier, and I did that not because of his Infinite combo, which I refuse to play, but because the same tools used in that Infinite combo can just make him a much more consistent character. There are tons of other little alterations that I don't want to get into, but I will briefly talk about the changes in my S tier, because S tier is, you know, the big one, the one most people look at first. I moved Wendy up to the bottom of my S tier, because holy shit, Wendy can do some absolutely silly things if you build a deck designed to cycle Pilfers, which you can do with very little experience, and she was already very, very good before that. I've also moved Luke and Yorick out of my S tiers. I think Luke is just not that strong in the first scenario or two and doesn't deserve to be an S tier, because I am evaluating them over the course of the whole campaign. And Luke, in scenario 1 and 2, if you miss your Holy Rosary or your Book Boost allies, whichever way you're building him, your stats are dog, man. They are terrible. 4-head Mystics do not do well without anything to help them, and 3-book Seekers are not a thing outside of Luke. So whichever way you build him, you can just draw poorly and feel like you really don't have the stats to do your job in the first couple scenarios. And with Yorick, I mean, I said it in the tier list, right? I talked at length about how I was probably going crazy and would have to move him down. I do still have him in A+, the only fighter I have above him in A+, being the Leo deck that I just talked about. But I think in the early scenarios, Yorick is just nowhere near an S tier character. I think in later scenarios with more experienced cards that make him more reliable, he's probably still pretty close to S tier and then like the late game. But in the early game, he just isn't there. He's not healing your team really. He needs to use the soak for himself. And he does still feel a lot like old Yorick with the way I'm building him in the first couple scenarios. And I'm sorry for not showing the tier list while I'm talking about this, But I feel like if I did that, I would just be answering questions in the comments at the end of time, and I should just make a video about it instead, and I don't want to do a tier list update less than a month after I made it. That's stupid. So instead, I hope you've been enjoying whatever nice scenery I posted in the background for this section of the video. And that's it for now. I've been Rather Incoherent. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, then consider giving the video a like and subscribing for more content like this in the future. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one.